Thank you, Minister. That was so beautiful. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Rachna Singh. I'm the EC's Parliamentary Secretary for Anti-Racism Initiatives. And I'm honored to be joining you today from the territories of the Lebanese-speaking people, the Eskimo, the Songhees First Nations. And I really want to thank you thanking all of you for being here today, both in person and virtually from across the province, as we mark Yom HaShoah Holocaust Memorial Day. This is a sacred day of remembrance when we join people around the world in honoring the 6 million Jewish lives lost during the Holocaust. Today we stand with the survivors and their families to mourn their loss and honor their strength. For most of us, it's hard to comprehend the magnitude of a loss this great. That's why it is so important that we come together to reflect on this tragedy and commit to carrying on the message. Never forget, never again. Now, introduce the speakers who are with us today: Premier John Horgan, Michael Lee, MLA for Vancouver Langara, and he's also the representative of the BC Liberal Caucus; Adam Olson, who's representing BC Green Party; Rabbi Harry Rachna of Temple Emmanuel here in Victoria; Liu Vogel, a Holocaust survivor; and Annabelle Wind. Thank you to all of you for being here with us today. To honor the memory of the millions who were murdered, we will now light candles. Jewish families light a candle in their home on the anniversary of a loved one's passing to remember them. So today we light candles to remember, along with others around the world. One candle for each of the 6 million Jews who were murdered in the Holocaust. First, we have Isa Milman, whose parents survived as prisoners in the Soviet Gulag, while the families who remained in the Polish, Ukraine, and Belarus were murdered by the Nazis and their collaborators. And now we have Jeffrey Drucker, volunteer chair for the Center for Israel and Jewish Affairs. And now we welcome Liu Vogel, today's keynote speaker, to light a candle in memory of those killed during the war. To light our fourth candle, we have Misha Menzer, who's honoring his parents, Mortel and Regina Menzer, who were survivors of Bershad Ghetto, and in memory of his grandfather, Moshe Dermer, and uncle, Jacob Dermer, who perished during the Holocaust. Fitch, board president of the Jewish Federation of Vancouver Island. And she's lighting a candle to honor the memory of 2 concentration camp survivors who recently passed away, Peter Gary and George Paul. Now I will invite Tessa Kutu, acting education director at the Vancouver Holocaust Education Center, to light a candle. And in the memory of the non-Jewish victims, including members from the Roma, Slavic, and LGBTQ plus communities, as well as people with disabilities who were also killed in the Holocaust, we call Premier John Horgan to light the 7th candle. Thank you, everyone. And now I would like to invite Premier John Horgan to say a few words.
Thank you very much, Rachna. Greetings, everyone. It's great to be joining you here today on this solemn occasion on the traditional territory of the Lekwungen-speaking people, the Esquimalt and Songhees First Nation. I want to acknowledge also Minister Nicholas Simons, who got us started in such a beautiful way. And I am always grateful to hear Nicholas express his passion through his instrument and sharing that all with us today. I also want to acknowledge my two colleagues, among the many colleagues that are here, but particularly Selena Robinson and George Heyman, both of who have been through the Yom HaShoah experiences here at the legislature in a deeper way than many of us can experience. And I know that, and I want to acknowledge both of them for their tireless efforts with respect to anti-Semitism and anti-racism here at the legislature and in their home communities. I also want to say to Rabbi Harry Rachna, it's good to see you again, to Leo Vogel and to Annabelle Wind. I look forward to your comments later on, as do I to my colleague Michael Lee and to Adam Olson on behalf of the Green Party caucus. On Yom HaShoah, we honor and remember the 6 million Jewish lives that were lost during the Holocaust, among the millions of others who were murdered by the Nazis during that period. Targeted because of their ethnicity, their sexual orientation, their disability, or their contempt for the Nazi regime of Hitler. A shocking number of real live stories about real live people. The numbers, the magnitude is so profound that it's difficult for us in 2022 to get our head around 6 million lives and countless others as a result of barbaric and inhuman a regime in the middle of Europe. But these individuals need to be remembered for who they were: children, parents, grandparents, brothers and sisters. And we did not just lose them from the earth, we lost their potential contributions to our collective society. We've lost poets, we've lost potential doctors, teachers, and countless others. And that's the real tragedy of Yom HaShoah, is not the quantum, not the massive number that shakes us to our core, but the extraordinary potential lost because of evil. As we honor the memory of those lost, we also pay tribute to those who survived. Those who survived the Holocaust, of course, went on to make incredible contributions to our society, one of which would be Rudolf Verba, who survived the Holocaust himself and who came and talked about the Auschwitz concentration camp, and later as a professor at UBC, co-authored an expose on the atrocities at Auschwitz, which led to the cessation of deportations of Hungarian Jews to the tune of over 100,000 people. Lives saved because a survivor spoke out. Lives saved because a survivor was able to tell the horrors to the rest of the world. Rudolf was just one of many, and of course there's others like David and Aurelia Goldberger, who started the legendary Gold's Fashion Fabrics on Granville Street in Vancouver, and Dr. Robert Krell, who pursued a career in psychiatry focusing on the impacts of trauma. These are all contributions today as a result of the horrors of the Holocaust that we remember and acknowledge and indeed celebrate when we think of the survivors that came from Yom HaShoah. Never again, as Rachna said, never again are the words that ring in our hearts and ring in our souls today and every day as we go forward. Over the past couple of years, we have seen an increase in anti-Semitism, unacceptably so, not just here in British Columbia, but indeed around the world. And the Jewish community is one of the most frequent targets of hate crimes in British Columbia, acknowledged by reports to police, and we are committed as a government and as a society to stamp out anti-Semitism, to stamp out racism wherever it may emerge. I'm so proud of the Legislative Assembly that we have today, a diverse group of people from every corner of the province, different faiths, different colors, different orientations, representing the fabric and dynamism of our great province. But in that dynamism, we have to acknowledge a tragic past, and we have to acknowledge that anti-Semitism does exist today, and we have to collectively work together to ensure that when we see it, when we hear it, we stand together united to say no, not here, not where we live. That's what Yom HaShoah means to me. That's what Yom HaShoah means to countless others in this legislature and in this province. We need to ensure that everywhere we go, we're providing a safe place for people to practice their faith, their orientation, their perspective, without fear of persecution by those who are filled with hate. Instead, let's focus on all of us here today who are moved and motivated by the love that inspired those survivors to continue the fight, to continue to acknowledge the 6 million lives that were lost, the lives that were extinguished before they could do extraordinary things in this world. Let's remember those people today, and let's carry on year after year to never again allow this to happen, not just here in British Columbia, but indeed around the world. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Premier, for your words. Now, I would like to invite Michael Lee, MLA for Vancouver-Langara and member of the BC Liberal Caucus, to say a few words.
Well, thank you, Minister Singh, for inviting me and representing our BC Liberal Caucus led by our new leader, Kevin Falcon. I'm struck by these gatherings. Have had the opportunity to join many members of the Jewish community to reflect on this day, to learn from people like Dr. Krell at Hillel House or other gatherings, the Vancouver Holocaust Education Center, which is situated in my riding at 41st and Oak. I know members of the Legislative Assembly, Minister Heyman and others, Minister Robinson know that center well. They play a very important role to how we continue to understand and appreciate what has happened. We mark Yom HaShoah, Holocaust and Heroism Remembrance Day, at this gathering. Every year we commemorate this day to remember the heroes and the righteous among nations who stood up to oppose the most vile hatred and oppression. And remember the millions who were persecuted and killed during one of the most heinous acts in human history. When we recognize the victims and survivors of the Holocaust, we make a solemn promise to never forget and never again allow such horrific actions to take place. This is a responsibility that we all must carry with us, not only today, but every day. And it is a responsibility we must be better at upholding. As soldiers at this very moment commit war crimes once again in Europe, we have not done enough. And as right here in Canada, as the Premier said, we see yet another year of record rises in anti-Semitism. We have to do better. The past year was the 6th consecutive record-setting year in a row for anti-Semitic incidents, and the 4th year in a row where there were more than 2,000 incidents reported. As many of you know, while Jews make up just 1.25% of the Canadian population, the Jewish community is the target of a truly shocking 61% of all police-reported hate crimes in our country. The Jewish community here in British Columbia experienced a 111% increase in anti-Semitic incidents between 2020 and 2021. And across Canada, the number of violent and anti-Jewish hate crimes rose by 733%. This is truly unacceptable. It is clear that declaring never again is not enough. Standing up against hatred, violence, and anti-Semitism requires bravery and a commitment to action. And the one thing that we can and should take action on here in British Columbia is the adoption of the IHRA definition of anti-Semitism, following the lead of the federal government and standing up to protect the Jewish community from this consistent and constant rising tide of hatred and discrimination in our country. I've previously stated in our Legislative Assembly my personal support for the adoption of this IHRA definition here in British Columbia, and I continue to urge our provincial government to adopt this definition as it considers legislation to address hate and racism in our province. And with candles, the lighting of candles, and others who are about to share their stories here today, and as we reflect on those who risked their lives to save others from the Holocaust, demonstrating love and compassion in the face of darkness. Their heroic actions are a reminder that we can and must always stand up for what is right. By carrying out the legacy of bravery and hope, that legacy, we can honor the heroes and survivors, as we are doing today, but also build a better and safer world for us all. Everyone who calls this province home deserves nothing less than a complete commitment to stamping out all forms of hatred and discrimination.
Thank you, Michael. Now I would like to welcome MLA Adam Olson, who's representing the BC Green Party, to say a few words.
Thank you, Rachna. Mr. Premier, to the members of our cabinet, to all the members of the legislative, our guests, the Jewish community leaders, I'm honored to be able to be here today to say just a few brief words. Yom HaShoah, the Holocaust and Heroism Memorial Day, it's a day of somber reflection. And it's important to acknowledge that I think there are very few words that can adequately describe the atrocities that took place in Europe just 8 decades ago, 80 years ago. And while time distances us from the horrific events, the memories and the stories remain steadfast in our mind and are carried and passed from one generation to the next. Holocaust was an ultimate form of evil, persecution, oppression, genocide, complete disregard for human life, pushed to the most appalling degree. Today we take a few moments to acknowledge those memories, to acknowledge the impacts that that's had on the survivors' family, and the rest of our society. 6 million lives were lost. And that's just the number of lives that were directly affected. You think of all of the millions of people that have been impacted since then. All of the different family members, extended family members, communities that were impacted by this. We cannot let this atrocity ever occur again. We cannot let humanity evolve into these such heinous crimes. And while we take today in particular to remember these stories and these lessons, they must always remain in our minds. And as my colleagues, Premier Horgan and MLA Lee, have said, to think that this is a past problem, a history problem that we have, is to truly misrepresent the challenges that we face in our modern day society. This is a today problem. This is an us problem. All of us problem that we need to deal with together. We often like to, in our country, to think of the things that happened before and separate ourselves from that. And today is the day that we need to embrace the reality that we are living this. And just last year, or just within the last few months, yet another heinous act against the Jewish community happened at a school here, I believe. This is a today problem. The Holocaust is a stark reminder of the darkness, the wickedness that can exist among us. And however, this is also, I think, important to acknowledge that this is a story of strength and resilience in humanity. And to that I raise my hands to all of the survivors, the Jewish community that have ensured that the world knows and hears these stories. We cannot, as difficult as it is to continue sharing them, we cannot stop hearing them, or else we will fall victim to thinking that we have passed that now. So let's take heart in the power and strength of communities to overcome the darkness. Let's honor and learn about all those that stood up in the face of evil and danger and demonstrated the good and richness and beauty found in all our collective humanity. Hajkasiyam, thank you.
Thank you, Adam. Next, we have Rabbi Harry Brackner of the Temple Emmanuel, who will say a few words and lead us in the Lamalai Ruhumim and Kodesh prayers, also known as the mourners' prayers. Welcome.
Premier Horgan, members of the Legislative Assembly, friends, it strikes me that not so many years ago I would look out and see so many survivors. And after so many decades, they're not with us anymore. And that weight, the gravity of being a witness and telling their story, I think it sits with all of us. And it's not so simple. One survivor who I want to mention today, who was a friend and a congregant, was Agatha Feldman. Agatha was a psychiatrist, a deep humanist, an artist, and a survivor from Budapest. She once told me that when she was in the labor camp, she knew almost in the fibers of her being that she was going to survive. And she knew because she felt like she needed to live her life as the antithesis of Nazism. We use the words never again. Frankly, I don't know what that means anymore. It's become cliche. It's something we just say and we move on with our lives. I know sometimes we think never again, that belongs to nation states, that belongs to bodies and collectives that are bigger than each of us. But I think for myself, and I want to offer it to all of us, is that if we really believe never again, we need to hold on to what Agatha taught us. We each need to live our lives as the antithesis of Nazism. We need to be able to see that each other person is created in the image of the divine. To see that each of us is worthy of incredible dignity and honor and connection. And that we really do need to fulfill that sense of loving the other as we love ourselves. Because if the horrors of that poisonous pedagogy, of that horrific ideology of Nazism, shows us the potential of humanity in its most negative and destructive forms, then we're truly hold the potential of the converse, of what does it mean to really see each other and to really care and to really work towards a sense of shalom, of peace and wholeness and goodness. The other thing that I'm holding in my heart this morning is to think about the numbers of survivors who died recently in the Ukraine, who died when they were cold again and hungry again, and died in the face of violence. That never should happen. And we all know that. And I don't know how to make those big changes. I'm not a world leader. I'm a leader of a small little congregation. But I think we're all leaders of our hearts. And if each of us can make that difference, it's got to have a huge ripple effect. So I ask all of us, when we stand, we have a moment of silence, to commit to being anti-Nazi. And it takes courage. It takes courage because I think that when we're afraid, those voices of racism and xenophobia, they rise up in all of us. Being anti-racist, being anti-Nazi, it's important. It's important because we know. I don't know a single kid in my congregation who hasn't had some moment of discomfort, hasn't experienced some kind of microaggression because they're a Jew. And we're not so visible. Imagine our brothers and sisters in British Columbia and throughout the world and in Canada who are visible and what they go through. If we're really going to live that sense of being the antithesis of Nazism, we hold them in our heart and we demonstrate care and love and openness. So I'm going to ask us to stand. I'm going to chant a very old prayer called El Malei Rachamim, God of compassion. It's a prayer that asks God to hold the souls of the 6 million in safekeeping. El Malei Rachamim, Shochem b'maromim, Hamse menucha nechona tachat kanfei השכינה, במעלות קדושים וטהורים, כזורקים מסהירים, את נשמות 6 מיליון אחינו ואחותינו, שנהרגו על קידוש השם. בעל הרחמים, יסתירם בסתר כנפיך לעולמים, ויצרוב בצרכים את נשמותם. אדוני, אתה הוא נחלתם, וינוח בשלום על משכבם, ונאמר אמן. To our 6 million brothers and sisters murdered because they were Jews, grant clear and certain rest with you, divine source, in the lofty heights of the sacred and pure, whose brightness shines like the very glow of heaven. You, God, source of mercy, hold them, enfold them under your wings, in your embrace, secure their souls for eternity. Adonai, they are yours. May their rest be peace, and let us say, Amen. I'm going to read the Kaddish, which is really a prayer of life, a prayer of acknowledging that which holds light and is good in the world. We have this sense of adding the names of the camps. It creates that horrible dissonance. And it's that horrible dissonance that we hold. We hold the light and the potential, and we also hold the reality and the memory of that reality, and those aspects of the reality that still linger. Yitgadal Auschwitz, Vitkadash Shemei Rabbah Lodz, Bialma divrach chirute Ponar, Viamlich malchute Babiyar, B'chayechon uvyomechon Meidanek, ובחיי דכל בית ישראל ברקנאו, בעגלה ובזמן קריב כובנו, ואמרו אמן ינושקה. יהי שמי רבה מבורך לעולם ומעל מיה, יתברך וישתבח טרזנשטט, יתפאר ויתרומם בוכנוולד, יתעלה ויתהלל טרבלינקה, ושמד קודשה בריחו וילנה, לאלה ברגן-בלזן, מן כל ברכתה ושירתה דחאו, תושבחתה ונחמתה מינסק, דמירן בעלמה ושע, ואמרו אמן. יהי שלמה רבה מן שמיה, וחיים עלינו ועל כל ישראל, ואמרו amen. And those of you who know the end, please join with me. עושה שלום במרומיו, הוא יעשה שלום עלינו ועל כל ישראל ועל כל יושבי תבל, ואמרו אמן. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Rabbi. Now it's my honor to welcome Lew Vogel, a Holocaust survivor, to share his thoughts and experiences with us.
Survivors of the Holocaust, Mr. Premier, guests. The Second World War ended in 1945, but for the people who lived through it and survived that horrible blight in human history, for them, 1945 is not the Holocaust, is not when the Holocaust ended. It continues to this very day to live in memories and nightmares and ongoing health problems. For me, it channeled my life from the moment I was born more than 80 years ago. Pandemics permitting, we now gather yearly in Victoria on this special Yom HaShoah Day to commemorate this horrible time, not to remind those of us who were personally affected, because we know, we remember, but to keep the horror of what happened visible to others who only know about it as something that happened in the past, so they will still remember. The fascist attempt to eradicate the Jewish people must never be forgotten. The memory of the tortured and murdered cannot be shoveled underground as the Nazis did with their ashes. As children in the Holocaust, we were the youngest, and now, in our older years, we are at the tail end of those who can still bear witness. I wrote this poem about children who were in hiding from the Nazis, and it's called Child Survivors. We are the last, the cabooses of the cattle trains left behind to roll on an empty track of fugitive memories. Our cries of pain often were ignored by those who said they'd suffered more, but suffering cannot be quantified. Many thought we had not seen, yet our eyes are the last that looked and saw. Silently we endured, hiding as we were taught. We are the last who can still shout out about the witnessed horrors. I was born in 1940, and then just 2 short years later, my parents, who were not even 26 years old, had to make a heart-piercing decision that in order to provide safety for me, they had to put their trust in strangers who would hopefully take care of me and hide me from the marauding hatred of Hitler's people. Not long after that deeply painful decision to separate me from them, they were deported to Auschwitz, and there they were murdered, without ever knowing whether their desperate act to allow me to go into hiding saved my life. I get cold chills when I think of the intense agony they went through in making their decision. It would have been their hope, I'm sure, that one day we would once again get together. That day never happened. Their pain must have been overwhelming. Many times I have wondered what they said to each other and to me the night before they gave me away. And countless times I have asked myself whether I would have had the strength to do an equal act when my children were young. Now there's a new genocide daily happening, daily visible on TV. The same struggle is taking place with other parents also under siege. Their children are looking around wildly, not able to understand what's happening. These children, if they survive, will be fated to a lifetime ahead of remembered trauma. It should make the world weep. Hitler's regime did not succeed in killing me, but it decimated my total family. And at the age of 3, I had become a warphan, a war orphan. I remained alive because of the courage and dedication of many people. For one, They were the Dutch underground resistance workers of young men and women. These brave people could not stand by idly while children were being killed. Then there was a child care center, the creche, or it's called as a creche, a holding center from where children were taken to various places in the country to be hidden. Their heroic behavior is currently being made into a documentary film called The Angels of Amsterdam. I remember only fragments about these early years, but I know the list of those responsible for my survival is longer than I'm aware of. And with my whole heart, I say, may the memory of their unselfish courage always be for a blessing. At great danger to themselves and their own family, I was in hiding for the duration of the war with people who were also active in the resistance movement. And after the war, I continued to live with them for nearly 5 more years. I had become part of their family, and I considered them to be my parents. But because they were not Jewish, the court decided that I could not go on to live with them, and that I had to stop using their surname, which, for security reasons, we adopted during the war years. This decision eventually led to me being placed in an orphanage when I was just 10 years old. There, I struggled daily with my new identity and loss of my second family. And now I stand here, many years after the war, recounting how I survived. But at the same time, on the other side of the world, another regime has unleashed its evilness, and with a deeply felt sadness, I echo the words of Pete Seeger. When will they ever learn? When will they ever learn? Thank you.
Thank you so much, Leo. Thank you for coming here, for sharing your story. I know how painful it is, but how important it is for our future generations to know what happened to you and that it should never happen again. Thank you. Now I would like to welcome Annabelle Wind, public servant who works in the Ministry of Children and Family Development and is a third-generation survivor, to perform a song.
Thank you, Rachna. Holocaust survivors, Premier Horgan, honorable guests. This song was Israel's entry to the 1983 Eurovision Song Contest. And there on the stage in Berlin, Israel sent a message of thriving and optimism and hope for the whole world. And I would like to share that song with you today. It's very noisy. שמעו אחי, אני עוד חי, ושתי עיניי עוד נישאות לאור. רבים חוכי, אך גם פרחי, ולפניי שנים רבות מספור. אני שואל ומתפלל, טוב שלא עבדה עוד התקווה, עובר מזמור מדור לדור, כמו מעיין אשר מאז עולם. אני שואל ומתפלל, טוב שלא עבדה עוד התקווה, חי חי חי, כן אני עוד חי. זה השיר שסבא שר אתמול לאבא, והיום אני עוד חי חי חי. עם ישראל חי. זה השיר שסבא שר אתמול לאבא, והיום אני הומים ימיי ולילותיי, ובשמי עמוד האש עוד קם. אשיר בלי די אל ידידיי, כל ידידיי אשר מעבר ים. אני שואל ומתפלל, טוב שלא אבדה עוד התקווה. חי, 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 כן אני עוד חי. זה השיר שסבא שר אתמול לאבא, והיום אני עוד חי, חי, חי. עם ישראל חי. זה השיר שסבא שר אתמול לאבא, והיום אני עוד חי, אני עוד חי, אני עוד חי, אני עוד חי, חי, חי. Thank you.
Thank you, Annabelle. That was so beautiful and such a fitting tribute. I invite you all to take a moment to remember the millions of victims and their families, and to recommit to standing up against anti-Semitism and racism in all its forms, so that we can build a better, more inclusive province for everyone. Once again, thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you.